Hello, Breaking Out Bad here. So I talk a lot about the importance of process, and the reason I do is because you have no control over your profit and loss on a per trade basis. The market determines whether or not you make money. And if you don't understand what that means, there's a book called Trading in the Zone by Mark Douglas that you absolutely must read. It's one of my favorite trading books, if not my favorite trading book of all time, and it really helps develop the right kind of mindset, the winning mindset that you need to be able to trade. But since you don't have control over the outcome of any given trade in terms of profit and loss, and even on a daily basis, sometimes you need to focus on what you have control over, and that's process. Now, I created this tool for two reasons. The first reason is to allow me to be able to track my process in terms of grading it, in terms of how well I'm executing it over time. And the second reason is so I could build habits that over time cemented in my mind so that I only focused on process when I executed my trades. The more you go through each day and grade your trades based on process, you will begin to build habits. You will begin to think about not the outcome when you're in a trade or when you're executing a trade, but are you going to get a good grade on this trade at the end of the day or when you go to grade it based on how well you execute your process? Because knowing that is what actually matters in trading. That will lead you to profitability, assuming that your edge has been proven to have a positive expectancy. Your process is the key to getting there. So that habit is built essentially by repetition over and over again of grading trades every day based on process in an objective and honest manner. And soon after doing this for a certain amount of time, it'll vary from each trader, but it will become second nature essentially, right? What you're focusing on will be process related, only process related, and you will forget about everything else. You will forget about profit and loss. You will forget about the outcome because you know that's not what matters in trading. You know that's not what is going to make you a successful trader over time. Actually, the opposite is true. If you focus on the outcome, there's a very high chance, rather, that you will not be successful because you're focusing on the outcome. You're not focusing on the process, which is what gets you to the outcome over time. So those two things are the reason I created this tool. I wanted to be able to objectively grade my process, and I wanted to be able to, through repetition of grading, build habits, which would basically make executing my process second nature, essentially, and just, allow me to completely forget about the profit and loss aspect on a per trade and per day basis. So, that's not to say that profit and loss doesn't matter. Obviously, it does matter, but it matters on a longer time frame. It matters on a weekly, it matters on a monthly, on a quarterly, and an annual basis, right? If you're not seeing a positive expectancy profit and loss on a longer time frame, then you've clearly got some problems with your edge. And if you're looking at your process grading results over time and you have not so good grades, well, you've also got problems with execution, right? But if you are executing well and you're still and you're getting good grades with this tool, but you're still not having positive expectancy, well, you may have a problem with your edge based on market conditions. They may have changed, which may be rendered your edge less effective. You may have some kind of a flaw in your process itself. You may need to go back and take a look at it. You may need to talk to other traders about it. But generally speaking, you will find, assuming your edge has a positive expectancy, and your process is a solid process, that you will, over time, following your process, see a positive profit and loss. Okay, so that's when profit and loss matters. Longer periods of time, right? It doesn't matter on a short-term basis. You have to remember that. You have to think about that every trade you take. Profit and loss can never enter your mind unless you have a daily loss limit rule and you've gotten to that point, then you need to stop trading for the day, obviously, and follow whatever rules you've set. But outside of that, on a per trade basis, do not think about profit and loss. Only think about executing process, and you will find a great improvement in your trading, not just in terms of the outcome over time, but you'll feel better. It feels better to focus on what you can control, which is process execution. When you try to focus on profit and loss, when you try to force the market to pay you, which it's not going to do if it doesn't want to, you're putting yourself in a position to have a lot of distress, which is just going to make your mindset, it's going to weaken your mindset, really. And you don't want to do that. You want to protect your mindset, as I've mentioned in previous blog posts and screencasts I had put out. So focus on the right things. And again, that's why I created this tool. And now, there may be other options out there. I haven't done a lot of research in terms of what there is to be able to, grade your trades. I don't know what's out there. If this tool doesn't work for you, I highly recommend to look. And if you can't find anything, try to create something on your own, because you really just need to find something that you can use to grade process. It will make a huge difference in your trading if you do. So, but I created this tool specifically because I wanted specific things. I really am a big fan of this color-coded heat map visual element. It communicates to me very easily information that I am looking for, and I really like that. I also have complete control over the customization for the trades, and in terms of the how I track, and obviously you do as well, because you'll be able to download this tool and use it with the Google Sheets and Google Drive, or if you want to download this to Excel, you can do so as well. And the instructions for doing one of those two things are right here. So now when you first get this tool and see it in Google Sheets, you will see that all of this data right here is gone. Okay, this data is just essentially filler data that I've created for the sake of this the screencast, so that I can actually can show you how it's intended to be used over time. But this information up here will still remain here, and these notes within the categories as well of this process, which essentially is a process that I've created as an example here, which includes most of the common areas of a trader's process, but this will be included. But you'll want to obviously customize this based on your own process, so that you can it can be so that can really be effective and meaningful. If you're just using this template information here, and there's elements of your process that do or do not belong, that you have not added in here, or you've not taken out, well, then you're not going to really be using this tool as it was intended to be used, which is completely customized and aligned to your process. So make sure you customize when you get this tool. I highly recommend watching this video and screencast all the way through. I cover everything, and I'm going to try to do this as efficiently and quickly as possible, but I just want to make sure we get everything, so there's not going to be any technical questions at the end, because I don't have any time for technical support with this, unfortunately. If you have questions related to process, absolutely send me a mention or direct message on Twitter. I would be happy to speak with you about that. But technical questions I'm not going to be able to help with. So I'm going to include everything in here that I feel is important to be able to use this tool, to 100% potential, to that what it was created for. So as I mentioned, make a copy for yourself, using one of these two options here. And then there's a blog post as well associated with the screencast and with this tool you can check out. It's got some supplemental information as well. But really, everything you need to be able to use this tool to its maximum potential is going to be included within this screencast here. So let's jump in to actually talking about customization of this top area here, which essentially has the different sections of the process example that we have here, and then also the categories within those sections. So, for example, there's a plan section, right, which only encompasses the trade plan of the process. there's the entry section, which actually has everything related to your entry in your process. So we have edge, we have risk versus reward, we have position size and risk, and we have entry. Now there's exit, everything pertaining to your exit for your process, which is, for this, we have 3 different columns, but as you can see, essentially what we're doing here is we're choosing one of these options, whereas these we're entering a grade or a point assignment based on how well we executed each part of the process for that trade. We're going to choose whether or not it was a winning trade, a losing trade, or a scratch trade. And that's just going to kind of communicate to us on a higher level over time. We'll be able to look at these trades and see, for example, okay, so I had a losing trade here, but I actually executed my process well, right? I got the maximum number of points here, which is what these are. This is the maximum number to the left, and then the minimum, which is probably always going to be 0 to the right. But it shows that, did well there, even though it was a losing trade, and actually did well here, and the grade was a B. So it'll kind of communicate that to you, the outcome, and then you can kind of, look and compare that to the actual grade, which gives you a little bit more meaning. And it also just visually kind of shows you how you're doing with profit and loss on a per trade basis over time too. So that's the exit section, and then there's the other section, which includes other things related to the process, like intuition, emotion, and patience. For intuition, it's very important that you read the warning that I have in here, okay? About whether, if you're a new trader, you definitely shouldn't be tracking intuition. You only should be tracking intuition if you're experienced, you have years in the market, you've developed your intuition to know exactly what it is. Otherwise, you don't want to track it. And I'll show you how to not track it but still keep it in this tool in a little bit here. But that's very important too. So essentially that's that's what the sections and categories are. The point assignment, as I mentioned, you have a maximum for each category and a minimum. You also have the potential for a middle ground here. As you can see, we have 5, 3, and 0. Essentially, if you have a situation, a category where it's not always black and white, perhaps you did some things, you didn't completely outright, ignore that part of your process for the trade, but you also, you didn't execute it perfectly. Maybe you have some middle ground, essentially. So, you can have an option for that as well. Create the scale however you want to. You can weight different categories within your process based on their importance relative to the other areas. For example, here we have trade plan, which has a 10-point maximum, where the others mostly have 5, except for intuition, which also has 10. And what this really is saying is that, and I actually use this personally with a higher weighted trade plan, that I know that if I'm not executing my trade plan for every trade, that I am going to automatically be put in a disadvantageous position most of the time, because during the trading hours, it's time to execute. It's not time to create a trade plan. It's not time to, diligently analyze things, right? That's pre-market. That's the night before. You want to execute in real time, so you need to follow your trade plan. Otherwise, you're going to be, probably one step behind all the other traders out there who have a trade plan and who are executing according to that. So for me, it's very important that I follow the trade plan on every trade. Now, there could be a situation where you have, some information that's become available during the trading day that wasn't the night before or the morning of when you created the plan. Now, this could be an example of maybe putting 5 in the middle here, and saying, I executed. I executed my process. It was a valid trade idea. It wasn't in the trade plan, but variables in the market changed in the day. So you can consider that, not necessarily ignoring your trade plan, but not necessarily following either. You can consider that as maybe a middle ground answer here. As you can see with this 5-3-0, you could put 10-5-0 and then say that was a 5-pointer, right? So, but you have to be very clear when you're defining the ranges the point scales, the meaning, the objective meaning, and the objective point assignment to each answer that you have, so that when you go through and grade each trade, you're never going to potentially leave room for subjectivity, which could make your data not be as useful as it will be if you are always being objective. And that's why here you can see this note located over the cell, and they keep kind of popping up here, but located over the cell of each section category. It includes a question that you're going to be asking yourself when you go to grade the trade for each category, right? And then it includes the potential responses or answers, and then the respective point assignment as well with those answers. And you're going to need to customize these, just like you customize the sections and categories based on your own process and the point scales. But you're going to want to make sure that you do this as well, so that if you ever kind of forget what exactly you're looking for when you're grading, you can go in here and you can hover over the cell for the category, and you can make sure that you're going to be answering it just the same as you've answered it all the other times. Again, so there can be consistency with that objectivity. So that's how you can essentially adjust the points and then weight the point, weight different categories differently based on their importance. You can also have the middle ground, as I mentioned too, but you have to be very, very specific about that middle ground, so that you're not leaving a kind of a loophole there to maybe not give yourself a 0 because it's going to really hurt the grade. So you go to the middle. You have to be very clear about what that middle is, and it really has to be something that's tangible. If you even use it at all. Many traders may just want to go ahead and just say, okay, yes or no. There's only two answers, yes or no. Did I do this or did I not do this? It's completely up to you and how you want to use it. So let's move on now to the process of actually adding and then and deleting these sections and categories. So editing is obviously pretty straightforward. You just double click on the cell. Okay, you can double click on any of these cells. Pretty straightforward here. If you want to add a section or category, to add a section, just click on one of the existing sections, which is what has essentially it's the cell that's in this top row here that has this gray fill color. Click on any of those and then just do insert column left. Okay, and then you can edit it, give it a name for that section of your process. Give it a point assignment here in terms of the maximum, the minimum, and then middle ground if applicable. Give the category itself within the section, the first category, a name as well. And then add a note as well, just by right-clicking and then insert note. And then finally, make sure that you put an X in this template row 5. Okay, make sure you do that for every new category you add. And I'll explain that, why you should do that relatively soon here. So that's adding a section. Say you want to add a category within that new section, just select the column that you added, do insert column right, and then that first cell to the right of the initial column that you had added, just go ahead and change the fill color to white, just so you can have a consistent style here with the others. Okay, and if you want to add categories also within pre-existing sections, just click anywhere within the section, within the first and the last, and either add to the left, okay, if you're in the last, or the right if you're in the first column of that section. Okay, we'll just click a middle column here, and just column right or column left is fine. It doesn't really matter. And then you'll just add it in there, and again, make sure you add an X, fill out the other areas as I mentioned before. If it's an actual category of your process that might have a few options, like for example this exit, you choose one of these, right? You don't fill in a point assignment for each one. You either won, you lost, or you scratched the trade, right? You just want to put choose here in this row 2 if there's a few options, right? So and then if you want to delete, you can do so. Just make sure that you're deleting columns initially when you set this tool up, right, when it's fresh, when this data is not here at all, you're only going to have this information up here, and then the template row, obviously. But make sure you're deleting in the beginning. But when you start adding data, it's important that you do not start deleting columns, because you're going to screw up your historical grades. That information will be taken out of here, which will affect the actual grade and make it look like something that it actually wasn't. So I'll show you essentially how to stop tracking something you want to no longer track if down the road you want to change your process and you want to get rid of something. I'll show you how to stop tracking that while not deleting the column completely. But if you want to, when you set this tool up, you want to delete columns. To customize it, you just select, and then you can just right click on the column itself, and then delete column right here, and it's gone. Just make sure that when you're deleting columns, also adding columns, that you're not deleting the last column here, okay, or this first one. Now, the column letters may be different for you as you adjust, and they will be different because you'll have more or less columns potentially. So you may not have a first column of a C and a last column of an N, right? It could be different. So just make sure it's not the last one and the first one. You don't want to delete these, and you don't want to add columns to the right of the last one and the left of the first one, because it will potentially screw up the range calculations here in terms of the points and how they're, what columns are actually included to get a grade for you. As you can see, we have some C5, N5, right? So it's this C to N. If you start adding columns to the right of N and to the left of C, they're not going to be included in that range there. So you're not going to have an accurate grade. Even if you fill in answers, it's not going to be included here, that number, to give you a calculation. So that's very important as well. Make sure that you don't add to the right of the last column here. You don't add a column to the left of the first column. Okay, so we've gone through adding, editing, deleting the columns for the sections and categories. To customize this, we've gone through how to use the point scale, and then how to add notes as well, and the importance of adding notes. So moving forward now, I'm just going to undo some of these changes we've made here. Get back to where we started. Okay. Now let's go through the process of adding a new trade. So this row 5 is what we call the template row. And essentially this is going to be the row that you're going to copy the contents down from into the new row that you add each time you want to add a trade to this sheet. So select row 5 when you want to add a new trade, and then do insert row below. Okay, from there, all you want to do is select row 5, right click on it, choose copy, and then select the new row, which is row 6 here, and right click and then paste it. Okay, so all the contents will be copied down. All of the X's are copied down. I'll explain the X's in a second. All of the formulas from that template row are also copied down. As you can see here, most of these cells will have formulas that exist already. Some of them may not. Like you can see, this doesn't have anything here. I'll explain why in a little bit as well. But all of this important formulas will be copied down, which you need to be able to make this tool work as it should. So that's very important. Make sure you always copy down template row 5 into the new row. To start, when you want to add a new trade for a new day, first off in the day column, you want to just go ahead and add the date. So let's just go ahead and add an upcoming date here. We'll say March 3rd. Okay. And then for whatever first day, the first day of the week that you're adding a trade in, it may not be the actual first day of the trading week. Say it's maybe a Tuesday or Wednesday. Whatever that day is for you, I like to bold that. You can use a keyboard shortcut. Depending on Mac or PC, it's different, or you can just click it up here. But I like to bold that just to kind of communicate visually that that's a new week starting. As you can see, too, we have these horizontal lines. These horizontal lines also communicate the end of a week and the beginning of another week. And when you essentially are done with your week, that last row, that last trade, which is the last row of that week, you'll just select it, and then you'll just go up to border, and then just add a top order essentially, right there. So, but that communicates that you have a week ending and a week beginning. As I mentioned, I really like this tool because it helps visually communicate certain things just by looking at it. So, these horizontal borders communicate the different week boundaries. The vertical borders communicate the different sections. And then, like I said, bolding the first day of that week that you're trading just communicates that's the first day. So, I like to use those. It makes things easier in terms of looking at it. And that's how you can use it as well. So I bolded that first day of the week that I'm trading. And then the day trade number, obviously this is the first trade, so we'll put 1. Each trade that you add in, you just, you add another one on top of that. So the next one we'd add is, would be number 2, number 3 after that, and so on and so forth. So now you need to go through the process of actually grading. So you need to go through each category and ask yourself objectively, honestly, did you, for this example, does your trade plan, does the trade align with this day's trade plan? Yes, it does, or no, it doesn't, right? And you just look at that question, and then you look at the answer, and you answer it honestly and objectively. And you will get the most out of this tool. If you don't, if you're subjective, you try to make it look better than it was, like I said, this tool is really not going to be very useful to you because you're not being honest for whatever reason, and you might as well not use it. So just be very honest and objective when you're doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and fill some just some data in here and move through this here. You can just tab through each time you fill in a number. Let's just say for this particular trade, we did pretty well with everything. The only thing wrong is we didn't have accurate position sizing based on our process. Let's say we size this up too big, so we're going to give that a 0. But everything else is actually pretty good. It was actually a losing trade. So when you get to this exit section here, you'll want to delete whatever it wasn't. So if it wasn't a winning trade, you just go ahead and delete the X for that cell. We'll tab through. It was a losing trade, and we actually didn't manage our loss very well. Since we actually positioned the size of the position was larger than it should have been according to our process, we actually were emotional with that, and we didn't let the trade play out, and it actually would have been a winning trade if we let it play out, but it didn't. So we're going to give ourselves a 0 on that. You might find sometimes that's some correlation between you not doing something correctly or well according to your process in one area, but how that affects another area as well, and that does happen. So that's why it's important. A lot of this stuff is correlated. So you have one problem, one area that might cascade into a few other areas and absolutely just destroy the potential for the trade, not just from a grade perspective, but also probably in terms of the outcome too. Because remember, again, it's all about following your process. Process will lead to positive outcomes over time. Okay, so now we're tabbing through intuition. Again, read the warning if you're new. Let's just say that you're experienced and you're going to track intuition. Let's just say yes, we followed it. We were emotional and impatient because we sized up too large. We lost, and we're going to give ourselves a 0 there. So once you go through, you grade the trade like that. You can go ahead and just click on, delete this X in the ready to grade column. There's instructions on that. Any of the important columns here, there's going to be instructions in the cell on how to use it. I'm going to mention it here in the screencast, but they're also going to be included here too. And there's also going to be, warnings about what you shouldn't do. Like, for example, you don't want to remove this A or B. You don't want to remove these from the tool. Otherwise, this won't work as it should. So just make sure as you're going through initially trying to use this, you can just hover over, these cells to see exactly what you should or should not be doing. Like I said, I'm going to mention them now, but just as additional help. Okay, so we're going to delete this because we are ready to grade this trade. Once you do, you're going to find a grade come in here. Okay, so it's essentially taking the range, your first column here, C, and your last column here, L. Again, the column letters may be different with your range if you added columns when you adjusted this, or deleted when you adjusted this initially to this area. So this is just the example, but you could have different column letters in here. Just keep that in mind. Okay, just make sure that for the template row, after you make adjustments, that your ranges are including your first column and your last. And if they're not, you want to make sure you adjust. Okay, you want to adjust. This is C5 to L5 with a colon in between. If maybe you added a few columns, you made a mistake, you added a column outside of this last column, you want to make sure that it includes C5 to, for example, N5, right? If it goes out to here. It all just depends on where your range is for all the information for that trade that you want to track according to your process. Just depends on what those columns are, what the ranges are. Okay, so we got 35. The maximum number of points here is 50 points. If you added all these up, the maximum points for each category, and then only selected one of the 5s here, you would get 50 points. So you go 10 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 30, plus one of these 5s is 35, plus 10 more is 45, plus 5 is 50. All right, now you can see that total right here, the last number, 50, okay? Now, after you adjust this and customize this, you may have a different maximum number of points that you can make per trade. Okay, so you need to add up the maximums as defined here based on your adjustments. Again, only including one if you have a choose section where you have multiple options. And then just figure out what that number is, and then just change this 50 to whatever the maximum number of points is. And you want to make sure you do that in the template row 5, because you're going to be copying that row down again into each subsequent trade that you add in to this tool over time. So it has to be in the template row, okay? And then there's this trade grade as well here, okay? And this is essentially going to be the scale to assign a letter grade. If you want to adjust the scale, you can. The current scale as it exists now is 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 90 is a B, 70 to 80 is a C, 60 to 70 is a D, and then anything below 60 is an F. You can just adjust, if you want to change this scale, you can just adjust these decimal places, which they're percentages, adjust them as need be. And then once you're done, to make sure that you don't have any errors in there, to make sure that everything is as it should be, you want to go ahead and first off in this trade total percentage in the template row 5, double click, and then just make sure that you copy. Okay, I'm using keyboard shortcuts here. I'm copying it. Okay, I have that contents of that copied to the clipboard. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter manual percentages just to verify, okay, that I'm getting the corresponding letter grade that I should be. Okay, so go through and just do this for as many different numbers as you want to, just to make sure that it is as it should be, and that you don't have any problems. If you do, you want to go back in here, you want to adjust again, and then test again. And then once you're done, just go ahead and select all of this, and then just paste that formula that you had copied initially to the clipboard before you started entering in manually different percentages to test the grade scale. Just paste that back in there, and then just hit enter or return, depending on Mac or PC that you're using. And then you should have blank cells here. Assuming that if you want to go and just double click, which you should, just to make sure that that formula is back in there, and then just make sure that your scale is here as it should be, the adjusted scale. Okay. And then you're going to have other columns in this tool that will show grades as well. As you can see, you can have one for the average day grade, for the average week grade, and then on the day sheet you also have one as well. You're going to want to make sure that you have a standardized way of calculating that letter grade. So make sure that when you adjust it here, whatever it's going to be, you adjust it in these columns as well, right? The day grade, the average day grade, the average week grade, and then also on the day sheet too, right? The day grade as well. And actually on the day grade, on the day sheet rather, there's also an average week grade as well too here that you want to adjust. Template row, actually on the day sheet, it's template row 3. You want to adjust this scale as well so that you have consistency across all of the different, letter grade columns. Okay, so once you do that, we can move down here to the average day section here. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to have to add in another grade just to make it, show you kind of how it's intended to be used. Basically, it's going to be taking the average of each trade, the average grade of each trade for each day that you add in here, and it's just going to give you an average grade for that day based on those trades. So we're in template row 5. Click on any cell or highlight the entire row, okay, and then just insert below one more time. All right, and then we'll just copy the contents down. I'm going to use keyboard shortcuts now. I'm not going to be right-clicking. It's faster, but that's what I'm doing. I'm just copying and pasting that contents down again. Okay, so now this is a second trade. We're not going to put the day in since it's the second trade. We only do that for the first trade of each day that we trade. So 2. And now I'm just going to add, again, random contents in here. Let's say this trade, we didn't have very good risk reward. It wasn't an acceptable 2 versus 1 as we defined here. Risk versus reward is the risk versus reward. At least 2 are for this trade. No, it was not. Let's just say maybe it was 1.5. So that's going to be a 0. And let's say we did well with position size and entry. And actually, it was a winner this time, and we did execute pretty well on the exit. So let's give it a 5. We just didn't have an acceptable risk versus reward. We followed intuition, and we were good with our emotion and impatience in terms of managing that during the trade. So now we'll go ahead and just delete this X, and we'll get a grade. Now this is a pretty good grade. You followed everything in your process perfectly except for the risk reward. That wasn't adequate. So you got an A in that trade. And depending on your process, and maybe you want to weight, risk versus reward as, maybe as a 10, right? So maybe the maximum number of points here would be 55. And if you were to do that, right, the maximum number of points, this is just an example. Don't go back and edit trades from the past like this, but say it's 55 as a maximum. Well, then it's going to affect the grade a little bit more, as you can see with the weighting. So we're just put it back to what it was. But that's just an example of the power of the weighting. We get one thing wrong, which actually was weighted higher, just from what I did. Rather than 5, we tried 10 points. We get a B instead of an A. So it makes you really want to focus more on that particular area of your process the more you weight it. So that's something to kind of think about when you're weighting and setting up this tool. Okay, so back to here. So now we're at the average day percent column. So you can just delete this X, right? The X is just going to show you where you want to answer, where you want to enter the following formula. And there's only going to be one X per day. It's going to be the first row of that day. The first trade essentially is what it is. Again, just delete the X, and then we'll just, you're going to basically enter the following formula. And it tells you what you do here. We're just going to enter it here. So equals sum, open parentheses. We're going to select the first trade of that day, left click it, hold down the shift key, and then left click the last one, and let go of the shift key. Okay, it's going to select that entire range for you there. And then close parentheses, / which is divided by, and then count, open parentheses, and then we'll do the same range. Left click that first row, that first trade. Okay, hold down the shift key, and then, let's go back and adjust that again. Sometimes you may have issues, just go back and just adjust it. Okay, so again, left click, hold down the shift key, and then let go of the shift key after selecting that last row, and then close parentheses, okay? Okay, so now we have the average grade for that day based on those two grades. And that makes sense, right? 90 plus 70 divided by 2, right? Just counts the number of trades, right? However many rows you're selecting, you're adding in that range, gives you 80%. So, this day column is just basically it's just taking the first day of that week to visually make it easier for you to see where you're at as you're scrolling through this. Moving on to the week, average week percentage, same type of thing here. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add another day. We need to have at least 2 days here so that we are, actually getting meaningful averages rather than just having one, basically one row that or 1 day of the week that we're including. It's going to be multiple days, obviously. Now, you might just have 1 day in a week when you trade, and that's fine. But for this example, we'll just add one more day in here. So insert row below, template row 5. I'm copying the contents here, and I'm pasting with shortcuts on the keyboard. Okay, so now we have a new day. Let's just say it's 5/4. Okay. And then from there, this is just the first trade of the day. And then we'll just go ahead and fill this out here. Let's say we did well with everything except, again, position size. We struggled. And then let's just say in this trade, our entry location, according to this information we have here, it wasn't actually a valid market objective area to base our risk off of. Okay. So let's just say that instead of entering at a place where we had a valid area to base risk off of, the stop was located outside of a valid invalidation point. Let's just say we didn't do that. So that's going to be a 0 here. Okay. And let's just say for this trade, it was actually a winning trade. Okay. So in terms of the exit, let's just say we did not interfere. It actually hit our target. We didn't screw around with the trade, and we let the trade play out, and it was a valid market objective target that we had selected. Let's just say that we did all those things for this, so it's a 5. Now, if you are, if you have position sizes out of whack, you size too large, and you don't even have a valid place where your stop is, a lot of the times you're not going to get a win. But, sometimes you will, and this is the point of this, to show you, that this is not necessarily a good trade, even though you won on it. You failed on these few areas. So let's just see what we get on the grade here. So we're going to delete these 2 areas, these 2 categories, these X's. We don't need this because this is a winning trade again, as mentioned before. Okay, so we'll give it a 10 on intuition, and then emotion, impatience. Let's say that emotion played a role here as part of this entry, this poor entry. We were basically chasing, right? We were chasing an entry. We wanted to get into the trade. We were really anxious to get in. We had a larger size. We were thinking about the profit and loss, thinking about the money. So let's give ourselves a 0 on that, okay? And now ready to grade, delete the X. Okay, you can see that gives you a C. Actually, you're right at the border from a D, which is just below 70. So that's very important, to note. You're getting a couple things wrong here, and although it's not the heavier, more heavily weighted areas, let's just say actually here for the trade plan, let's say because you chased on this trade and your entry wasn't acceptable, and you had a larger size because you were thinking about making more money on this larger position size. Let's just say that you didn't follow your trade plan. Your trade plan didn't call for that. We'll give it a 0. Now you can see it really affects. How you see this cascading effect where you maybe do a few things wrong, well, it can affect other areas too. Okay, so we have an F here. Okay, and this is for another day of the week. So moving over here again, first we got to give the average, the day, an average, a percent. Since there's only one trade for this day, we'll just do equals sum, open parenthesis count. We'll just select the percentage for that particular day. For that trade of that day, / which is divided by, again, count, open parenthesis, and then we're just counting the number of trades for that week, for that day rather, which is only one trade. That's why we didn't hold down the shift key and then select multiple like we did before. For the 5/3 2016 example with 2 trades, we just hit enter. Okay, so we get an F for that day. We only had one trade. That was the average trade percentage for that day, and that's corresponding letter grade is an F. Okay, so moving into the week, the first cell, the first row of that week is going to be where you're going to want to put in the following formula. And again, we describe it here, what you want to have. But essentially, it's just going to be equal sum, open parenthesis. Okay, and then you'll want to scroll over here to your percentages for the trade, right? This is the trade section. These lighter gray fill color cells. Okay, the slightly darker gray is for day, and then the darkest is for week. I like to color code these different time frames essentially, because I use daily, weekly, and then per trade on a trade by trade basis. I use it in other Google Sheets as well, so I like to keep that consistent. But that's what it means. So we're going to make sure we do it from the trade section here. Sum of, we'll do the first trade of that week. Okay, that we're going to be getting the average for, and then hold down the shift key and then left click the last trade of that week, and then close parentheses, / for divided by, type in count, open parentheses, and then select the same range again. Left click, hold down shift, click the last row, the left click, and then close parentheses. Okay, so that's your average grade for the week, your average percent, and then your average week grade. If you add up all of these, okay, if you add up all of these percentages and then divide it by 3, you'll see that you'll get 70%. Right? So 90 plus 50, 140, plus 70 is 210 divided by 3 is 70. So that's how we're getting that grade. Make sure you're not using the range for the average day percentage, because essentially that will skew the weekly grade. Let's say that you have maybe 10 trades in one day, and then another day you have 1 trade for that week. Well, if you're just going to be including these, the average day percentage, well, you're giving the same equal weight to one day where you had only 1 trade, whereas the other is 10 trades, and you're giving it the same weight, which isn't true, right? That other day with 10 trades, you need to factor in all of those trades that you took. So you always want to include the entire range of all of the trades in the trade total percentage column when calculating that weekly percent. Okay, so moving forward, we are at the total trades for week here. We just want to delete the X, open parenthesis, and then as you can see, as you're scrolling, the first 2 columns, they are frozen so that you can easily see, the day and then trade number as you scroll, which makes it easier, because it is kind of longer and horizontally speaking. So you can just select, you'll just, let's see here, we'll just enter equal count rather, not sum, equal count. We're just counting basically the number of trades for the week here. So you select the first row, left click, hold down shift, and then left click the last row, or the last trade rather, of that week, and then close parenthesis. And that's all you need for that. I also want to mention too, I keep mentioning for the ranges, hold down shift and then left click, and this, you can just manually type in the ranges too if you want to. So let's just go ahead and delete this really quick. I'll show you the other way to do it. Equals count, open parentheses. Now as you can see, right, the first row, the first trade of the week is in row is in cell B8. Okay, 8 is the row, B is the column here, right? And then the last one is 6, row 6, same column, B, right? So we're going to be manually entering B8 colon B6. Okay, as you can see, it's highlighted over here as well. Okay, now it doesn't matter if you enter it in like this, where the higher number is actually before the smaller one. As you can see, when we enter this in, make sure you use close parentheses, enter. You get the same outcome. You can see that Google Sheets actually flips it around so that it's in correct order. So that's just another way to do it if you want to manually enter it in. moving along here to the, and this just kind of shows you the, obviously the total trades for the week. As you're scrolling through here visually, having this information I found, kind of helps me, make sense of the data a little bit, So also here we have the ability to essentially calculate the number, the distribution of letter grades for all the trades taken for the week. So what we want to do is we want to see, how many A trades were taken for the week, how many B grade trades were taken for the week, C, D, F. So here what we need to do is, again, it's going to automatically put this in this green fill background in this A column. Once you fill out this, once you get the count of the total number of trades, right, for the week, you'll have this come in, and you'll just double click on the cell. Now, don't be intimidated by the formula here. You're only going to have to change two things, and it's very easy once you do it a few times. So the first thing you want to do is you want to look for COUNTIF. It's going to be in here twice, okay? So once you find COUNTIF, you look for the variable directly after it. And then once you find it, which in this example is P8, you might have a different variable depending on the number of columns you have, when you added, deleted columns when you first set this up. But you'll find that first variable to the right of COUNTIF. For example, for this one, it's P8, and P8 is P is the column where you have the actual trade grades. Okay, we're going to be counting the range. We're going to be looking for the range of all the days for the week in this column, because we're going to want to count the number of, for this example, of the number of A grades for the week. So we'll use 8 P8, which is the first trade of that week in that column. Okay, and then we'll do colon $. Make sure you use $. You need to have $, and I'll show you why in a second, but it's absolutely essential to include $. And then P, it's going to be the same column, and then we're going to be using row 6 because that's the last trade of that week. As you can see, row 6 right here. So just include all of the trades for that, include the range for all of the trades for that week in this. And then once you're done with that, you want to go ahead and edit the second COUNTIF and put the same information there. So for this example, again, you might have different columns and rows depending on the number of trades you have for the week. And if your columns letters are different based on the number of columns you added or deleted when you first set this up, just make sure that you enter in the same range as you did before and then hit enter. Okay, and you can see right here we have 33.33%. So we took 3 trades for the week, okay? One of those trades is an A, right? We're looking at the A column, right? So that's 33%, 1. That's what this does. This is just communicating to us for all the trades taken for the week, how many of them were A grade trades. So now to get the rest, all you do is, okay, and this is why it's important to have the $, as I mentioned earlier. Click it and drag it to the right. There's a little, on the Google Sheets here, there's this little thing. You just click and drag all the way to the right. You'll fill this in. Now you can see you've got 1 A grade trade, 1 C grade, and 1 F grade. Okay? And as you can see here, that's exactly what we did for the week. Okay, so that's all it's doing. It's just counting. And it'll show you the corresponding percentage too based on the total number of trades. Right here, which is why you need to fill this in accurately as well to give you accurate percentages. And then from there, we're going to go to the number percent perfect grades for the week and then percent D and F grades for the week. This is just going to count the percent of, as I'm sure you can guess, the number perfect 100%. It's what this 100% is right here. Grades for the week, and this just will tell you how many D and F grades you have for the week. Make sure that you don't adjust or touch these letters up here. It's very clearly stated here, but just to kind of emphasize again, and this 100%. Don't remove this. If you do, you're not going to get the accurate results that you're looking for here. So let's double click in on this formula. we're just going to be looking for, again, COUNTIF, the same thing as before. It's in here twice. We're going to adjust this twice. The variable is a little different. Instead of P8, it's O8. That's just because instead of looking at the letter grade column, we're looking at column O now. For this example, again, your column might be a little different, but it's basically going to be the trade total percentage column. We're looking for all of the trades for the week that were 100%, right? We're counting the number of perfect trades, okay? So obviously we don't have any, but let's just fill this out for the sake, so you can have this historical information and just kind of look and see over time, all the perfect trades you took for the week, the percentage of the total trades you took for the week, how many of them were actually perfect. Okay, so we'll adjust. We have 08, for that column for the total trade total percentage, and then we'll need to be including the last trade of the week as well, right? The first is the 8, the row 8, right, and the last one is 6, just like before, 8 and 6. So we'll do colon, $, again, just like before, O, and then 6, and then you want to put the same variable range for the second COUNTIF right here. Okay, so colon, $, O, and then 6 for this example. Yours might be different. All right, we didn't have any perfect grades, so it only makes sense that we had 0. Same thing here for D and F. Okay, we'll change. This is a little different, but you still have a COUNTIF right here. This is going back to column P, which is the letter grade column, as you remember before. Okay, we'll do the same range as we've done. We want the first trade of the week and the last trade of the week to be included in that range. So it's P8, right? P is the trade grade. We're counting the number of D and F grades for the graded trades for the week. 8, and then 6 is the first. So we want this range here. So P8, colon, $, again, P6, and then you want to go down to the other COUNTIF included here, P8, and then just do colon, $, again, P6, enter. And now you can see you have 1, which is 33%, which is, you had 3 trades, so that's where the percentage comes from. And then you obviously had 1 F trade for the week, so that's why you have a 1. So I like using this for the week. It kind of gives you a nice recap. Just kind of can kind of show you the distribution of A through F graded trades that you took, and then it can also show you how you're doing in terms of perfecting following your process. There is no such thing as being perfect in terms of trading with profit and loss, since you cannot control how the market is actually going to pay you, but you can control your process. So theoretically, you can perfect your process execution. You can have perfect grades. You can aim for perfect grades. Be realistic. Nobody's perfect, but I like to include this here because it really kind of just shows, for the week in terms of the overall trades, how many of them did I just flawlessly execute my process. And that's just something interesting to see, as well as the D and F grades. For some of these, as you can see, we took 13 trades for this week example here, and 2 of them were D and F, which is 15%. Contrast it with up here, out of 16 trades for the week, right? 8 of them were D and F, 50%. So visually, this information can really just speak to you, kind of about these very specific things in a very easy, simple manner. So that's why I like to include them here. Okay, so now we've gone through all of this. We've explained all the different sections, and we've gone through the examples and just showed you how it works. So hopefully everything here makes sense. Like I said, there's information on each of the cells, for each of the important areas that you need to edit. Just make sure you follow those instructions and rewind and play back the screencast to the specific areas if you have any questions. So from there, like I said, once a week is ended, let's just finish this part of the sheet off here by just a few more things in terms of the X's, and then these empty cells, and then the color coding, and then a few more things just related to the how the data is actually communicated here. And then we'll move on to the day sheet, because I think we've covered just about everything here. So like I said, when the week is over, you want to make sure you click that last row, that last trade within that week, and then just insert a top order to it, right? And when you start inserting another row, right, from template row 5 for the next week, you'll have that border on the top to divide this for you. So, for this example, there's some weeks where there's only one trade taken, so it doesn't mean a lot. But as you go down, you can see more visually this division by week here, and that's the intention. So, okay, so moving on to the X's. Again, like I said, it's imperative when you add a new column in here that you make sure that you have an X in the template row 5. What this communicates when you add a new row for a new trade and then copy that information down from row 5 into the next newly added row, it just communicates that this is something you need to answer. You want to answer this with a number, right, with a point assignment before you give yourself a final grade, right? That's something you're currently tracking. That's what the X means. I'm currently tracking this. Now, if you want to stop tracking something, for example, say you don't want to track, as I mentioned earlier in this, I was going to get back to explaining how to not track intuition, but not delete it at the same time. You can just put a dash in here in the template row 5, all right, so that when you copy this down, the dash will be copied down, okay, and that will just tell you the dash communicates, don't fill this out, don't answer this. You're not tracking this. Either you're not tracking it from the get-go, or it's something that you were tracking, you decided you wanted to stop tracking. So let's say maybe you wanted to, I don't know, all these things are pretty essential in my opinion, but just for the sake of this example, say you wanted to stop tracking, it's hard to get rid of one of these, like I said. Let's just say position size. Pretend this is something else because you obviously want to track your position size as part of your process. Pretend this is something else. We're not going to track this anymore. Put a dash in template row 5, and then when you add a new rows in, over time, you're going to have all these dashes fill in, right? Because you're not going to answer these. You're not going to delete it. You're not going to fill it out because the dash is going to communicate that you're no longer tracking this information or you're not tracking it from the get-go until you actually are ready to track intuition, which then you can change this back to an X in the template row. But you'll leave all those dashes that were added in over time alone because that just communicated to you that you were not tracking that category. And that won't affect the grade at all with the dashes in there. But you'll also want to make sure that if you're not tracking something, if you want to stop tracking this, for example, you'll want to make sure if you're not adding a new category with the same number of maximum points, you'll want to subtract whatever that maximum number of points is to your total percentage here, right here, because it's no longer going to be 50. In this example, if we got rid of this column, there would be -5, right, because the maximum's 5, so 50 minus 5 would be 45. So you change that to 45 in the template row. So going forward, that's the total number of points. And then this would just communicate again, you're not tracking it. Like I said, don't delete a column. Like I said earlier, rather, in the beginning of this, don't delete a column if you want to stop tracking it, right? Because you'll delete all the historical data and you'll screw up your grades, not just for the actual grades themselves, but also for the daily grade, the average, for the weekly, and then all this as well. So don't delete columns. Just put a dash in template row 5, and then as you add, it'll just carry that dash down over time. And then we have blank cells here. As I mentioned, these are basically going to be here when, one, you have a choice, and you only can choose one. So you'll delete the X's for the ones you won't choose, and you'll pick the one and that you are choosing. So for example, exit, we're just choosing one of these. So it's either a win, a loss, or a scratch. We'll fill in the respective outcome with the number, whether or based on the question that we asked here. And then we'll get rid of the other X's. And that just communicates that, right? It was a choice. We could only choose one. Also, if you're adding, say you want to adjust your process, instead of maybe stopping tracking something, say you want to start tracking something, you're going to adjust your process and you want to start tracking a new area. So when you add a new column in to a particular section or a completely new section in and of itself, you will you'll put an X in, as I mentioned, right, for that template row automatically always for that new category. And then you'll also obviously fill in information here. I'm not going to do this now, and then a note 2, right? But from there, this is all going to be blank. And that's fine. That's just going to communicate that you were not tracking this information at the time. As long as it's not a choice, right? As long as it's not a choice here, and you were not tracking this, and you will track it going forward. So you'll start to have information in here, but that's all that will communicate. So don't worry about filling it in. You can't go back historically and remember all of these, whatever you weren't tracking before, what the actual value was for each one. So you want to make sure that you don't just go try to fill in and guess here, because that's going to screw up your grades as well. Since you weren't tracking that, just leave everything as it was, and start tracking it here. When you copy down from 5 into this, to the new rows that you add. Okay, so we've covered the X's, we've covered the dashes, we've covered the blank cells. And they obviously all have specific meaning. So from there, let's go to, I'm just going to go back here, undo these few things we did here. Okay, let's look at the color-coded aspect of this. So for each column in this example, in this template, there's going to be color-coded basically color-coded values assigned with different numbers. Okay, you'll need to go in this and adjust this manually based on however you change these scales and whatever you want the corresponding color to be with whatever point assignment is selected for each category in a trade. So for example, risk versus reward. We go in and we look at format and then conditional formatting. Okay, we can see we have 3 rules here. Okay, so the first one is value is 0. Second is value is equal to 5. And the third one is going to be included in all of the cells. And this is just going to give you the the alternating gray and white background fill color. Okay, so don't mess with this. This custom formula is even row, basically, is what it says. Just leave that alone. But these two are important, right? So 0 or 5. Okay, as you can see, if you select it, you have all these different ranges here. And that's because these ranges actually share this 0 and 5, right? This does, this does. I mean, they all do, right? If it's 0, we want red, dark red. And if it's 5, for these that have a maximum of 5 points, right, we want a bright green, or a green rather. Okay, so you can adjust the ranges based on whatever ones you want to include. For if the value is equal to 0, then make it red, right? And it's probably going to be everything, because the minimum for all of your categories should, I guess, be 0. So, but for 5, you can see here as well the same thing, right? We're looking at all of the different columns that have a maximum number of 5 points that we want to define as a green color, just to kind of communicate that this was done well. Green means good, red means, I guess, not so good if you want to look at it that way, but that's what the color coding is. And for some of these, you've got 3 as a potential. So if you click on that column, you'll see values equal to 3. You can see the ranges, the columns that have that as well. You can adjust this as need be. If you're not familiar with how to adjust the conditional formatting ranges, just Google it and you'll find it. It's pretty easy to do once you do it a few times. Again, you can change the values too if you want to have different values. Just adjust this as you need to. Just make sure that you test it too, and make sure that like for example, if you enter a 5 here, do you want it to be a bright green? If the maximum number of points is 5, so that's how I like to communicate it. But let's say maybe you have 10 as a maximum number of points. So we can use this as example here, right? Conditional formatting again. Value is equal to 10. So now these ranges here, as you can see, basically column C and column K, which is trade plan and intuition in this example, they're going to be, whenever it's 10, well, then it's a green. Okay, but if it's a 5, right, because sometimes you can have middle ground. It doesn't have to be yes or no, 0 or the maximum number of points. You can have middle ground. You can have 5. So there's a kind of slightly lighter shade of red here. Which kind of indicates kind of caution. You didn't do this perfectly, but you have some kind of a condition that's been defined. And as you can see, I'm a little flexible in terms of the notes here. Some of them, like this one, for example, has a 3, and it very clearly states exactly what you're looking for a 3 to be valid here. For this particular one. But for trade plan, there is no 3 here. And you can do it how you want to do it. You can just say if it's middle ground, you were paying attention, something happened in the market, but you got to make sure you're objective. So whatever you do, make sure that you're going to be doing this so you're using it objectively, you're not lying or being dishonest. But that's how this works then. So you got these ranges, for this middle ground here for this example. So basically, you want to go in and make sure that if you have added all your categories and sections, and you want to make sure that your conditional formatting rules are set up to communicate the appropriate colors based on the value that's entered, right? So make sure you test this and make sure it is as it should be, because this is a really important function of this tool for me. I love the heat map. I can just look down. To this particular week and say, wow, there's some real struggle in this week, because again, we're dividing it by the horizontal borders. There's some struggle this week in the entry section. Again, the vertical borders are also dividing this area too. So very clearly, this box right here is basically that week for entry, for the entry part of the process, and we're seeing quite a bit of red here. Now we scroll up, we're seeing over time, over here we've actually done pretty well, right? For these few weeks, we actually did really well. We struggle a little bit for these few weeks with position sizing, but that's what I like about this, is that it communicates that visually very easily and shows you where you're struggling and where you're not for a week or for a day or for a trade. And again, that's why I use it personally for other tools as well. So that covers this tool in terms of the trade aspect of the sheet. Now let's switch gears here and move over into the day aspect of the sheet, of the tool rather. Okay. Like I said, a lot of this there's gonna be overlap, so I'm not gonna go through all this again. But basically, just to start, this is grading obviously the day. So based on your process, you can define the categories, the sections, however you want to, grade your day, whatever information you want to use to determine whether or not it was a good day or a bad day. You define that here, so you can easily just edit this, edit these areas, as we did on the trade sheet, and then also, add notes here, which are very specific, and basically you're not going to have any room for subjectivity again. And I also include a warning here for intuition, just as I did on the other one. Instructions on how to not track it, but not delete it, as I said with the dash before, and then start tracking it later by adding the X back in. So, but adjust these based on your own system, your own process. And if you need to add more categories in here that you want to track for part of your day grade, we'll just do it as we did it, on the trade one. You can just enter them in. Just make sure that you're adding columns to the left of the last column and the right of the first, just like I said before, because these ranges are all, they're set up to include that range. So if you, from here to here in this example, so if you start adding to the right, well, it's not going to include that column, that number that you add in for this column to the right of this last column, because it's not part of that formula. So you'll need to manually go in if you do that accidentally and adjust. So just to get around that, again, make sure you add to the left of the last column and the right of the first. So you, like I said, add them in as you need be. Additional categories you want to track. Delete if you want to delete some. Do that as well. And then from the point scale too, adjust this however you want it to be. You can have some middle ground for the categories if you want to, or you just have yes and no. Maximum or no points. It really depends on how you want to do it. One thing I wanted to mention too, now that I just remembered, that I was trying to get to before, but I got talking on something else here. As you can see, some of these they have the question, what you're going to be asking yourself when you grade, and then you have the criteria for that, and then yes, no, or maybe middle ground. Some of them have a yes or a no. Others have yes, and then this one has no. It has very specific criteria too. So again, whatever you need to do and add to notes to make it as easy as possible for you to be objective when answering, do so, right? If you can get by with just saying, yes it is, no it isn't, yes it is, no it isn't, fine, do that. If you know you're not gonna, have any problem in terms of being objective with very simple answers and maybe even very simple questions, do it. But if you want to make sure that you're not going to have any, problem with, misinterpreting, miscommunicating that data via the outcome of the trade when you're assigning points, be more specific in terms of your answers here, right? In terms of the criteria for a no. Okay, so that can be done on the day sheet as well here too. That was just how it was done on the trade sheet. So like I said, customize this based on your process for the day, so you can get a bigger picture grade for the day. Let's see. So next we have the template row. Okay, so this is row 3 here instead of row 5 on the other one. Let's go. Oh yeah, one more thing too. If you're going to delete, make sure you're, again, like on the trade sheet, you're not deleting a column once you add data in it. That's very important. If you do that again, you're going to screw up historical data. So once you start tracking something, if you want to stop tracking it after a certain amount of time, just put a dash in that template row 3 here. That'll communicate. You're not going to track it anymore. And if you want to add another one later on as you're tracking, you can just add it in as I showed on the trade sheet. Okay, and then just leave these cells blank. That just communicates you weren't tracking, and then you'll track it going forward. All right. Okay, so back to inserting a new day, right? Each row is equivalent to a day in this tool, the day sheet, right? So we'll copy it. I'm using a keyboard shortcut to copy, pasting. Okay, so you put the day, whatever that is. So let's just match it up here with this sheet here, right? So we have 5.3 and 5.4. Okay, so we'll type in 5.3. For this day, we took 2 trades, right? 2 trades for 5.3. So we'll just type in 2. Now we'll go through this, and what we'll do is, we're going to answer these. Now, when you fill this out here, you can go back at your trade sheet. You can review, the trades for that particular day and kind of see how you did to help you kind of remind you about, how you did for each category section, and then use that, to give yourself a grade, or as you're going through the day, like I like to do, you can, you take notes. You take notes about the day too, specifically about your process, so that when the end of the day comes and you have to grade the day here, you'll have that information and it'll be easier to remember. And the same thing can be said too for the trade. I didn't mention this earlier. Take notes as you're going through a trade. So that when time comes to grade it, you're not going to have to rack your brain as much at the end of the day. So. And that's important too, is when you're reviewing this and grading yourself for the trades and the days, do it the same day. Even if you take notes as you go, this information is going to be freshest in your mind that same day. And you want to make sure that you're putting information in that is honest and accurate and objective. So do it the same day if possible, because the more days that go by, you're not going to remember things as well. You're not going to remember exactly how you were feeling, exactly what was going on, as well as you would the same day. So as soon as you can review, the better. So for here, we took some notes about our trade plan. We have our trades over here we can look at too to see if we followed them. Let's just say, for this, let's just say that even though we actually followed our trade plan really well, here you see we actually did perfectly for these 2 trades for that day. Let's say there were a few trades we didn't take for this day. We hesitated to enter, and they were part of our trade plan, but we didn't take them. So let's just say, as this says here, trade plan for 3 points, the middle ground, I followed my trade plan for the most part, right? You didn't completely ignore it. You didn't completely follow it. It's more of in the middle ground, a middle ground for this. So we'll do 3. Intuition also for this, right? Because you hesitated, you felt that your intuition was telling you that it was a strong setup. It spoke to you, but you just ignored it. Again, you did well in the other ones. You followed it, your intuition, but for not for a few that you missed. So we'll say 3 on that as well. Okay, so the trades that you took were they valid trade ideas? That's the question. So you go back and you look and you see, well, you've got some struggle right here. Okay, so you want to define your valid trade idea, based on whatever your criteria is. For this, it says valid trade idea, understanding the importance of only taking valid trade ideas as defined by my methodology. For example, edge, 2R plus risk versus reward potential, valid trade entry location. Okay, so you're looking at those 3 things, right? And those 3 things are essentially on your trade sheet, or this example sheet at least. Edge, risk reward, and then your entry, your trade location. Okay. So as you can see for these trades here, for the trades that were taken for the day, there was some struggle with risk versus reward for the second trade and the first trade. This is position size. So really risk versus reward. So you did pretty good, but technically, you didn't do that perfectly. You had technically that trade because you did not, adequately follow your risk versus reward parameters, right? You had a 1.5, I think, R potential on that trade instead of a 2, which was what your process called for, for it being a valid entry. You didn't follow that. So technically you had, based on this criteria here, right, all of your trades were valid. They were not. At least one of them wasn't valid. So you put 0 on that. Risk management, right? Okay, so when entering a trade, I based my risk off of and set my stop outside of a valid invalidation point. In addition, my position size was in alignment with my with the sizing, position sizing, and risk parameters of my methodology. All trades, at least one trade was not. So let's go back to the sheet for the trades that we took. We can easily go back here, right, and just kind of see how we did. Okay, so one of these trades, the first trades, had a problem with position size. We sized too large. So that's also no, right? That's not a valid trade. The position size risk management portion was not didn't follow the process, so we'll give that a 0 as well. What about trade management, right? Did you let the trade play out, right? Or was there a valid market objective sign that it prompted you to exit? Were you not being subjective? Were you not being emotional? Did you exit for a real market objective reason? Okay. And actually here you can see that you actually struggled as well too, okay, with this loss that you took, right? You didn't manage this exit very well. The trade management wasn't good. So we'll go back and we'll say 0 here. And then for missed trades, right, we did miss, like I said before, with the trade plan and intuition, we missed a few trades. So we're going to say 0, and that's how it's defined here, right? 2 or more missed trades. I didn't, and by the way, for this example, a missed trade is essentially a trade that was not something in hindsight that you saw, but something you saw in real time, either part of your trade plan, or something you saw in real time that that wasn't necessarily against your trade plan, that was a valid trade idea, and you just hesitated to take it. That's what a missed trade is. So if this one will say we had a few missed trades, so we'll say 0, right? Because that's what this says: 2 or more missed trades. Okay, so now when we're ready to grade, we just get rid of this. Now, as you can see, this is the difference between a day grade and a trade grade, right? Okay, so we did okay here. For the week, what did we get for the day? The average was 70%, but I'm sorry, for the trade average for the day, not the actual day. That was for the week. The average for the day was 80% rather. Okay, so now here's where you can see some difference, right, in terms of the grading. Right here we have an F, 20%. How is that possible when we had an 80% average day grade, right, for the trades? Well, this is measuring on a daily basis. Right? You're kind of measuring 2 different metrics. You're looking at trades, and now you're looking at day, right? So this is why I like tracking both things separately, right? This can kind of reveal something that maybe the trade grading is not revealing as well. And this type of thing really helps make you focus more on your process, on executing valid trade ideas exactly executing them. That's something you can control. There's no reason, for example, that for this trade here, the risk versus reward was not at least 2R plus, which is defined in your process as part of your process, in terms of a valid trade idea. There's no reason it shouldn't have been. You just shouldn't have entered the trade rather, right? So that's something you can control. And that's extremely important. If you can control it, this should be a 5. There's no reason this should be a 0. There's no reason you should take any trade that is not valid, since you can control every aspect of the trade idea. So this, although it might look kind of tough, this really communicates to you that, these things you can control. You can control your risk management, your position sizing. You can control entering a trade at a valid point of invalidation. You can follow your trade plan. All these things are in your control. An A grade is not a hard thing to obtain, right, for the day. But when you start, missing parts of your process, you're going to see this happen. So also let's go back here and add one more day for the 4th so we can get a weekly average. Okay, so we'll do one row below, and then we'll just copy this row down and then paste it. This is part of the same week again, 5-4, which was that other day that we tracked on the trade sheet, and there was only one trade for that day. Okay, so we go back, right? 5-4, one trade for that particular day. Okay, so going back in here now, we're going to do the same thing we did before. Trade plan. Do we follow our trade plan? So let's see. Again, this says 0. So obviously we didn't follow our trade plan for that trade, and then perhaps we didn't for the day too. So we're going to think about the entire day. We'll look back at our notes. We'll see how we did. Let's just say, yeah, you know what? That trade, we didn't follow it. We executed a trade that wasn't part of our plan. And then let's say maybe that we missed one trade for the day that also was part of our plan that we didn't take because we hesitated. Okay, so this is a 0 here. Intuition. For this one, let's just say that we did not follow our intuition as well. Our intuition told us that we shouldn't be taking a trade that is not part of our plan. Okay, so we'll say 0 on that as well. And then valid trade idea. So we'll look back for this day. Okay, and we'll see we struggled here, right? We struggled here with the entry. The entry location wasn't good, so that also is 0. Okay, risk management. How was the position sizing? Did we place our stop outside of a valid invalidation point? We also struggle with position sizing, okay, for that trade. And this was an F trade, keep in mind, too. So, the day's probably not going to be that great since we only took one trade and it was an F. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to have an F day. We could do things right as well in terms of not taking trades based on the market conditions, and maybe that, in terms of our intuition, that adds some additional points there, or maybe it helps our trade plan a little bit. But for the most part, it's probably going to be lower. So risk management, we'll say 0. Trade management. Okay, that's one thing we actually did really well for this trade. For the trades that we took for the day, which is this one, we actually did well with trade management. We got a 5. Okay, so we're going to give that the maximum number of points, 5. And then for this, we only missed one trade, right? I said earlier we missed one trade, so we'll put 3 points. We'll delete this. Okay, so not the best, right? Still pretty low. And, the fact that we got an F graded trade for that day, right? And then we got an F day, not a huge surprise. So, but again, this, don't get down if you get a couple Fs, you get a couple Ds, or you get multiple, days in a row. Use that information to improve yourself. This is not meant to be a tool that makes you get down on yourself. Actually, it's the opposite is true. You need to use this information, be a positive force in your mind as your own inner coach, and take this information and focus on what you did well for the day and focus on what you need to work on, okay? And then the next day you work on what you need to work on. And, just work towards gradual improvement in terms of execution of trades and day according to process. And that's all you can ask for. You're not going to get perfection, all right? Especially when you're starting out. You really, you got to learn to execute based on process. Force your mind to think about execution as it relates to process, not to profit and loss. So you may get lower grades as you start. And as you can see here in this example, that's kind of how it went, There's kind of D's, C's, and F's, as you're going up here. D, C, F, but as you go, over time, you can kind of see some greener pastures ahead. You're starting to do things a little bit better on the daily basis, on the trade basis. In the last couple days here for this example, we slipped back a little bit for whatever reason, but this tells a story, and the trade grade sheet tells a story, and use that information to work on self-improvement, and that you're working on something that is completely in your control. You're not working on just trying to be profitable, right, for the day or for the trade. Obviously you'd like to, but that's not in your control. Process is in your control. Focus on process, focus on the execution of it on a trade and day basis, and you'll see over time a better outcome. You'll see an improvement with this, as long as you're focusing on it, and as long as your edge is a valid edge. Also, for the first day of the week, for the day grade, I like to also bold that first day. And then for the last day of the week, like on the trade sheet, I like to select that last day row and then just add a border as well, okay, to help separate it for the week as well. So you can see these are separated by week, okay. And then the same thing here. If you need to adjust the maximum number of points for these different categories, or you want to add more, delete more, whatever, just make sure that the sum is going to equal, the sum in the day total percentage column is going to equal whatever the maximum number of points sum is, okay? So that's 30 points here, okay, 30. 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15, plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 30, right? That's why we have 30 points here. So adjust this in the template row once you have customized this tool to use it for yourself, so that you have the maximum number of points that you're using when you're grading yourself for each day. And the same thing as I mentioned before, adjust these ranges. Go back and watch the screencast earlier in terms of adjusting these ranges. If you want to have different scales rather than the default ones here, which for most people these are going to be fine. You're not going to need to adjust these, but if for whatever reason you want to, just go back in the screencast earlier where I talked about adjusting the scales for the letter grades. And then make sure you update it here as well for the weekly grade too. And then, from there, there's a notes column if you'd like to take notes about the day. Another column, other, call this something of, if you'd like to, call it something else. And then you can track that as well and put information there too. Or you can just delete these columns if you don't even need them. Doesn't matter, just select them and, just delete. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, I'm not going to delete them here, but and then the last part is just getting the weekly grade, the average, and then the letter grade for that week. So what we'll do is we'll just look at that first row, which is the first day of the week, okay, with that horizontal line below it. That we're adding the line for each week as I just showed. You just enter the following formula here: equal sum, okay, open parentheses. And then you want to take the first day of that week, left click it, and then hold shift, and then click the last day of that week, okay? And then let go shift, and then you want to do close, parentheses, / divided by, and then count. Basically the same thing we did on the trade sheet, okay? And then do that same range exactly that you had for the first part of this formula, and then close parentheses. All right, and there's your average. Not pretty for the week, but it is what it is. Use that information to improve, and that's all you can do. So this information kind of helps consolidate the weeks for you, kind of see how you're doing just on average for the weeks. This just shows you the actual just the day, each day here. And then I think that about covers everything. Like I said, actually, for this, the color coded thing is also very similar to the other sheet too. You do need to adjust this as well under the format conditional formatting for Google Sheets. You need to adjust this as well. But go back and watch the screencast for conditional formatting earlier with the trade section on how to adjust this too. I'm not going to go through this again, but you'll want to make sure that you update this as well here. After you customize this to your liking, so that these cells are going to communicate meaningful colors to you based on the data that you put in there. So okay, so there's there's three things that you really want to focus on when using this tool and these sheets. The first thing, obviously, as I mentioned before, is objectivity. You must be objective for this to actually provide a meaningful edge, really. This is an edge over a lot of traders who don't track this stuff, but it's got to be objective, okay? It's got to be trustworthy and objective so that you can grow from this. Also, you have to be honest. You have to be honest. You can't, try to massage your ego and prevent yourself from getting an F day. You just have to be honest. And the last thing is just consistency. You have to be consistent. You have to do this, as I mentioned earlier, every day that you trade. You have to record the grades as quickly as possible when it's fresh in your mind. You might take notes on the trade, you might take notes on the day, but it's not gonna be as effective as just grading after you're done. Okay, that's when it's all fresh in your mind. That's when you can most accurately go in here and be objective and be honest and not think, oh, did this happen? I can't remember. Do it as quickly as possible and just be consistent, right? In doing that consistency, you're obviously going to build up a nice historical archive of all of your trades based on the process and the grade assigned to it, but also for the day too. But you'll also be, creating habits, which will, as I mentioned in the beginning of this, they will make you focus more on process. You will start to think more about process rather than profit and loss. And that will help provide a great opportunity for growth for you and help, like I said, take a lot of the pressure off of your shoulders. You're focusing on the right thing, process, which you can control, and not the wrong thing, which is profit and loss for each trade in each day, which you cannot control in that time frame. So, do those three things: be objective, be honest, and be consistent in terms of reviewing. And and then obviously you just want to make sure you review this data. You look at this data, you analyze this data, and you figure out where you're struggling. The heat map helps a lot. Helps you see where you're struggling. On the trade heat map, it helps very well too. On the weekly basis, did you struggle in a specific area? Did you have a real strength in a particular area? Make note of that. Do a weekly review. Use this information. Take all this information. And use it to help, communicate how you're doing in terms of following your process. Focus on your process. Let this be a tool that helps you focus on your process, and you will see a dramatic difference in your experience with trading. And you will think differently. You will think differently than the majority of traders, all the traders who lose money, because they don't focus on process. If they did, they wouldn't lose money. And you will be a better trader if you use this consistently. It's just a matter of how long will it take. But, once you start executing trades, based only on process, then you will see, like I said, that, there really isn't a reason why over time you can't start to see positive expectancy, assuming your edge works. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. I don't see a scenario really where it doesn't work. Your process is what gets you to that point, and just focus on that. Make sure that's the focal point of everything that you do with trading. Live, breathe, eat, sleep, process, and it will take you to your final destination, right? Your goals over time. Which, honestly, in terms of monetary goals, you shouldn't set with trading. You really should set goals related specifically to process, on a weekly basis, a monthly basis. I have a simple goal every week. I will only take A grade trades, and that's what I do every week. I focus on that goal, and the money comes with that goal being hit, right? There is a correlation over time with that goal being hit. So, make sure your goals are correct. Make sure your goals are focused on the right thing, right? Focusing on process. And you will get those advantages, those monetary advantages, which is obviously what trading is all about at the end of the day, being profitable. Otherwise, what's the point? But I can't overstate it enough. Process needs to be at the center of everything you do. And if it is, you will see a big difference in your trading over time. I hope this helps. Like I said, if you have any questions specifically about process, you can mention me or DM me on Twitter at BreakingOutBad. You can visit my website at BreakingOutBad.com for other information relating to process, mindset, and trading. And any technical issues, like I said, I can't help with. I don't have the time. I've tested this sheet quite a few times. I use it personally. I know it works. So any problems you may be having, just go back and watch the screencast, and it should answer the question for you. And just enjoy. And when I started using this over time, I really have just came to really love and enjoy trading even more than before, because I was focused on what I could control, and that feels great. Focusing on something you can't control does not feel very good, and it causes a lot of problems with a lot of traders because they're focused on the wrong stuff. So focus on this, and I really think you'll have a positive outcome over time, not just with your profit and loss, but also with your experience with trading. So good luck.